Welcome back, everybody, to Toronto Today here on the Parlay. I'm your host, Luca Rosano, alongside my co-host, Michael Singh, and we are back for this Friday show as we're going to talk about the Raptors victorious once again. We're going to get into the Thad Young trade that broke live while we're doing the show yesterday. We're going to get into the Leafs losing, and then finally, Jozy Altidore says goodbye before we get into our best bets. We're first going to start at the top. It was a crazy show yesterday, very busy with NBA trade deadline coverage basically all day. And we got some breaking news. But before we get into the breaking news, let's talk about the Raptors. They do it again. They've won their 8th straight game. It's their 5th longest winning streak in franchise history. They beat the Rockets 139-120 without Fred VanVleet. They did cover that number, which went from -8 to -7 after the Fred news broke. So not a big change. But Gary Trent Jr., the story in this one, Mike, once again, dominating with a 40-point performance. He had 42 points, 5 steals, 4 assists. He actually becomes the 7th Raptor now to have multiple 40-plus games with the team. And then Siakam had 30. It was truly the Gary Trent Jr. and Pascal Siakam show against the Rockets last night.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you pointed out that line with Fred VanVleet being out and then only dropping 1 point, because that perfectly epitomizes what this Raptors team is. It really doesn't matter if one of their big guys are out, because as we've talked about so often, it's just someone else stepping up. And last night it was both Gary Trent Jr. and Pascal Siakam. Man, Gary Trent Jr. was feeling it. Like by the end of the game, he was doing a little hop step before driving. He was pulling up wherever. And when you're hot like that, it works. And Gary Trent Jr. is I don't even want to call him super streaky anymore, because this guy's super consistent at this point. But when he is on, he's really on, and he was really good last night. Overall in that game, as similar to kind of how that OKC matchup played out, it was one of those games where they needed a little bit of a break. They needed to take their foot off the gas pedal a little bit, because they've been in so much intense matchups lately. And it's nice to kind of unwind and not play your best basketball, but still find a way to come away from that game, covering the massive spread and, feeling good that your win streak is at 8 games. The first time the Raptors have won 8 games in a row in the last 2 years. So overall, a lot to like about that game. They get the job done, and it's not even close when they're facing bad teams anymore.
It's funny, too. You could tell their effort level wasn't really there. It was a sloppy game. You could tell they were just hobbling along, and then they were still able to beat the Rockets. And the Rockets actually held, I think it was a double-digit lead in the first half, or especially after the first quarter. And the Raptors just turned it up a notch, and then they went on that run that they normally make. They're in this win streak, and then they took care of business. And to me, Mike, I want to highlight Banton. He actually had 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists from off the bench in 21 minutes. It was great to see him get his. And we talked about the Raptors not addressing that backup point guard position per se at the trade deadline. So that tells me they got a lot of trust and hope in Banton. And then also, it was good to see Malachi Flynn get some run. Now, obviously, he got run because Fred VanVleet was not in this one. And I would not be surprised if Flynn didn't play at all if VanVleet was playing. But Flynn did play 21 minutes in this game, had 8 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Not a terrible stat line. He did contribute. So we'll see who emerges here. But my guess would be Banton. If he continues this type of play, I think he can only get better. And if Banton does live up to that hype and he does fill that void as that backup guard for the Raptors, that's going to be huge for the second unit.
Yeah, it's kind of catch-22 for the Raptors right now. Like, if this was a rebuilding year, which I mean, I feel like it was heading into this year, but if this was a rebuilding year and the Raptors were playing in kind of meaningless games, Malachi Flynn would be probably getting a lot more minutes, because it's kind of, he needs those minutes. As I mentioned, it's catch-22. He's not really good enough right now to make an impact on a playoff contender. But at the same time, you see the potential that he has. You want to give him reps. You want to give him runs out. You want to get him adjusted to the NBA style of game. There's just little time that you can kind of afford to do that when you're in the middle of a playoff push. So I was happy to see Malachi get some minutes, and maybe he is doing a little bit to earn the trust of Nick Nurse there. I think, Nick Nurse would be comfortable going back to Malachi. Delano, as you mentioned, he is the guy right now for sure. He's tearing it up whenever he goes down with the Raptors 905. He fits that mold of Raptors players having a lot of size. And he's playing some good basketball right now. You talk about his length, his energy, both ends of the court. Delano Banton, I mean, the Rexdale guy's showing up. So, yeah, I'm happy about that. And another shout I just want to give is just the Raptors in general. Third game in 4 nights. This is in the middle of a trade deadline, yet they're still here on a winning streak. I mean, that says something about your team, especially when they do it without their guy in Fred VanVleet too.
Yeah.
It wasn't the prettiest of times, as we mentioned quite a bit, but hey, they got the job done, and will recharge for another matchup this weekend.
Yeah, I love that they were able to rest Fred, because that was clearly set up for Fred to have the night off. I mean, it was the second night of the back-to-back. You're taking on a Rockets team that you should be able to beat shorthanded, and they did. So that did not cost this team. And now we'll see if Fred VanVleet is 100% ready to go for their next matchup on Saturday against the Nuggets. And that's going to be at home. I would not be surprised if the Raptors are favored in that game. I could see the Raptors win that game and increase this win streak to 9. Let's talk about the trade deadline move, Mike, now, because I feel like we didn't properly digest it while it happened live on this show. I was so flabbergasted by what just happened that I couldn't quite get my full thoughts on it. And I'm sure the same could be said about you. But here is the full breakdown of the deal, which did break live yesterday as we're doing Toronto today. Raptors trade Goran Dragic, Toronto's 2022 first rounder, protected 1 through 14, protected 1 through 13 in 2023, turning into future seconds for Thad Young, Drew Eubanks, and a 2022 Pistons second rounder. And then after that, Eubanks was waived. So now it's interesting because the Raptors have an open roster spot, and they can convert Champagnie to a full deal, which is the leading option here, or they could sign a Raptors 905 player, or they could try a couple different players out on 10-day deals. So first, before we get to that open roster spot, what are your thoughts on the trade 24 hours after digesting it? Do you like the addition of Thad Young going to the Raptors?
I'm still kind of where I was yesterday, where everything that I hear about Thad Young is very positive. Let me start off by saying that. He seems like he's a good teammate. He seems like he was well loved in Chicago when he played several years there. It seems like he's a guy who kind of plays a Raptors style of basketball where he, can move the ball. He can play make. He can defend. He can play multiple positions or guard multiple positions at least. But he's sort of redundant for me in the sense that Raptors have a lot of those types of players. And Nick Nurse, as I mentioned yesterday, he spoke about finding it tough to get someone like Khem Birch minutes when we know what Khem Birch can kind of bring to this team. Is Thaddeus Young that much better? Is my kind of gripe with all of that. I was hoping the Raptors could go out and improve their team a little bit more than someone like a Thaddeus Young, maybe address a center spot. And we think about this matchup on Sunday. They're going to be facing Jokic. Who on the Raptors is going to be able to slow down Jokic? They don't have a big body that they can necessarily put on Jokic. They have a lot of decent sized guys. They have a lot of length, but they don't have that size. That if Jokic posts up in the post, like who is slowing down that Jokic? And we know he's such a good passer of the basketball. So if they throw the double at him, it's gonna be really tough.
Yeah, let's. If I were the Raptors, I would see what Marc Gasol's up to. If he's still over there in Spain looking for some work, throw a 10-day contract at him just so he could go up against these big time centers. After digesting this trade, I'm okay with it. Here's where I'm at with it. The Raptors, their management, Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, they're smart. They always tend to make good decisions. This tells me more that maybe the market for Goran Dragic was literally next to dead. I really don't think the Raptors were able to go out and get what they truly wanted with a guy like Dragic who hadn't even played all season. So the fact that they were able to salvage just buying him out and get some value back in return, I'm okay with who they get. As you mentioned, Thad Young, he's a veteran, People have said so many good things about him. He's versatile. He's a great playmaker, which will help that second unit. He's obviously not a point guard, but he could play different positions and, help get others involved. He could rebound, all the little things. And he's a great defender as well. So that fits that Raptors DNA. I feel like where fans are upset is they wanted to get some of the other names that were rumored to come here. That true big like a Miles Turner, like a Nurkic. But I hate to break it to you, Goran Dragic isn't nearly as special as he once was. And he's not a hot commodity when it comes to trade value. So I really feel like there wasn't a whole lot there. Rumors could suggest otherwise, but that's why they're exactly that. They're rumors. And it's funny how this came to fruition of a guy that no one was really talking about and a move nobody was really talking about, because the only name that was talked about coming from San Antonio was Jakob Poeltl. But after they shut down the Bulls trade offer and the Bulls were reportedly sending a number one, I knew Jakob Poeltl wasn't going anywhere. The Spurs are obviously high on him. So I'm okay with this. The Raptors are still going to have their issues scoring from off the bench, having that playmaker from off the bench, that secondary point guard. But if Delano can step in, that fills that void. But like you said, Mike, yeah, the true test is going to be how do they fare against these big traditional centers like a Jokic on Saturday, like an Embiid, who the Sixers obviously upgraded their roster. That's going to be something that we got to look at here. But in terms of like even the draft exchanges here, I don't think it's going to be a significant drop off, because that second rounder that they get from the Pistons will actually be crucial, because the Pistons suck, right? So that's actually going to be the equivalent of like a high first round pick. So the Raptors could potentially snag somebody nice there. And the Raptors aren't going to suck either. So I doubt, that pick is going to turn into something of value for the Spurs in a particularly weaker draft class. I mean, this draft class hasn't necessarily been touted of being very deep like last year's. So I'm okay with this. I think Thad Young's going to be a culture guy. He's going to be a great fit. And my closing remarks to this is at least they got something back for Dragic, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, like it could be a lot worse. They could have ended up buying out Dragic. They get at least someone in return, as you're kind of alluding to there, and that, yeah, you're right. That drop off isn't too big. I guess we'll really assess this trade in a couple years and see also how Thaddeus Young fares on this Raptors team. I mean, like I said, by all accounts, he is that Raptors type of player. I know this is someone the team has been after for a very long time as well. So, hey, it's as you mentioned, better than nothing. And as you kind of alluded to off the bat as well, there's more opportunity now, because not only do they get Thaddeus Young, but they also create that roster spot by waiving Eubanks and also creating that exception in terms of they can, I guess have that as a trade asset, or maybe utilize that if they need to. And they're also under the luxury tax too comfortably. So
Yeah.
I would say Shenpenny is an option, but also watch that buyout market. Are the Raptors a team right now that's enticing to go to? I would argue that they are. They're one of the hottest teams in the Eastern, in the NBA. Let's not even say Eastern Conference. They're one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now. They, the culture the Raptors have. Almost everyone except for Dragic, I guess, wants to play in Toronto at this point. They've kind of shedded that stigma where, nobody wants to play for Toronto. I feel like Toronto is one of the coolest spots to play for. And I wonder if they can start competing with a team like Golden State or Philly or Brooklyn for some of these guys that are going to be coming out of the buyout market. So keep an eye on that. I think that would probably be more ideal for them to address any sort of need that you believe that they have, whether that is a backup point guard or a center or someone who can space the floor a little bit.
Again, I would call up Marc Gasol, see what he's doing. I know he's washed, but he's a big body, man. And the Raptors could use a big body, because I like what you pointed out too. It is kind of redundant. You look at their bench now. Thad Young, Achua, Kem Birch, Boucher, all similar players. And then you throw in a Banton. That's a big second unit. That's a big lineup. But those first four that I mentioned, they all kind of do the same things in different ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And none of them really shoot the ball particularly well either.
Yeah.
That's like another kind of concern for me. If you obviously can't roll out all five of those guys at the same time, because you're going to be playing like street ball there. Just no threes. That doesn't count. Just straight up going for twos there inside. So Yeah, I want to see how I guess the Raptors and Nick Nurse decide to utilize Thaddeus Young. That'll be very interesting, and we might get our first taste of that on Sunday. As you mentioned, I expect the Raptors to be favorites in that game against Denver, and it'll be a tough one. I think Denver has always given Raptors a tough time, and I know they're without Jamal Murray, but that team is still making waves in the Western Conference. So look out for that matchup, and I'm interested to see kind of what the line will be there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. That game's Saturday. Sunday's the Super Bowl. There's going to be
Ah,
no
got
Raptors
you.
game in the Super Bowl, which I'm happy because I didn't want the Raptors game to be when the Super Bowl was going on. But yeah, we'll see how that matchup plays out. Um, yeah, we'll see if the Raptors can keep it going. Okay, let's get into some Leafs talk now, Mike. Um, Pretty bad game for them last night. They lose 5-2. Their 6-game winning streak is snapped. They were minus 140 to win on the money line. And the Leafs lose this game despite having a significant shot advantage, 48-26. Markstrom was unbelievable. He made 46 saves. He was the first star in this one. And Calgary pretty much dominated the Leafs offensively, and they were just more physical, hitting them 14-6. And this was actually a close game. But then Jack Campbell, it was pretty brutal. He gave up 4 goals on 6 shots. And this is when this game completely just turned on its head. And you look at Jack Campbell now, goals against in his last 8 starts 5-3, 5-5, 3-3, 1-5. What were your takeaways from this game? And are you concerned with this rough patch from Jack Campbell?
So I am concerned, but I'm not hitting the panic button yet. With when in regards to Jack Campbell, because this is sort of a pattern that we're seeing with him, at least over the last 2 months, where he's letting in goals that he 100% would have stopped at the beginning of the year, halfway through the year. This is a guy who looked so sure in net, so poised. It looked like any time he squared up a shot, he wasn't getting beaten. But I thought on some of those last night, he could have saved a couple that he probably would have had earlier in the year, especially that when Leafs took the lead. And then 30 seconds later, the Calgary Flames came back down the ice. It was a nice play, nice shot from the slot off the post and in, but I felt Jack Campbell would have had that come 20 games ago. So I am taking notice of it. I wonder if the Leafs are as well, and they might give Jack Campbell some more rest here to hopefully get him rejuvenated. Because as you mentioned, Luca, there was no real break at the All-Star break. Like it was 2 days where the Leafs were off, 3 days at max.
Yeah.
So I wonder if the Leafs will throw Mrazek out there for a couple more starts. I know he's kind of picked up his game of late as well. So yeah, a little bit concerned there, wrapping that up for Jack Campbell. And in the game itself, I thought it was a playoff-like game. That was my impression of the game, like for the first period and a half. I loved the tightness of the game. I thought there was a lot of intensity. Both of these teams are in really good form right now. The Calgary Flames are a really good hockey team.
They are.
And what I'm more concerned about right now is Calgary played a playoff-like type of game last night. They finished their checks. I mean, there was a couple of times where I forget Andre Kasha, for example, he got rocked. Jake Muzzin, he got rocked. William Nylander, he got rocked. They were finishing their checks, and they have big bodies. You think about the players on their team, like Milan Lucic, for example, or Zadorov was stepping up. Matthew Tkachuk. They have guys who they're willing to throw around their body. They play a hard forecheck, and for me, they played like a playoff style of hockey. They weren't giving an inch of space. They were doing what they need to get in the Leafs' heads, and it concerned me because the Leafs didn't handle that very well.
Yeah.
You think about when Kasha got hit, it was Morgan Riley stepping up, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, like all 3 of the Leafs who stepped in there to support Kasha, I mean, they're all on the ice. Calgary Flames are on top of them. It's just that mentality thing where, Calgary kind of has the edge there. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, who on this team is going to come out next shift and send a message to Calgary? Well, just going down their roster and who was active last night, like Wayne Simmons, sure, absolutely, he can do that. Other than that, I'm like maybe Pierre Engvall, Jake Muzzin, but Jake Muzzin's just coming back from a extended injury. It was his first game back. The narrative that we've been talking about with this Leafs team for so long is that they play a little bit too soft.
Yeah.
And when you play a team like Calgary who plays that playoff like mentality, that's concerning because that's the type of games they're going to get in the playoffs. So that was my only reservation. But at the same time, like the Leafs have won 6 games in a row
Yeah.
heading into that one. So I don't know how to kind of perceive that.
Well, Calgary has been a phenomenal team, like you mentioned, especially at home. Their home winning streak now is to 5, outscoring their opponents 24-4. And I think that's what people are taking away from this. It's like there's two sides of the spectrum. And I saw two sides of fans' reactions, if you will, on Twitter. It's the fans that are looking at this like, okay, chill, guys. The Leafs are still 6-1 in their last 7. They're playing great. They can win every game, and don't make one loss seem like they're on a 10-game losing streak, which is a fair point. But then there's that other side that you alluded to. It's the type of game the Leafs lost and how they lost it, which could be concerning to people. You're going up against a very physical team. You have been a team that's been touted as being soft, and that softness did show. You had the goalie issues of Campbell completely just having a letdown and allowing Calgary to do what they do. And it's these type of high intensity pressure games that send Leafs fans back to all of those collapses, because we know this team, they don't necessarily perform well under pressure. And this was kind of that high intensity, pressure packed, big time feel game. So that's where I can see the frustration and the disappointment and concern, I should say, of Leafs fans after a loss like this. So I'm probably where you're at with this. I'm not ready to hit the panic button, obviously. But let's keep this in mind. Let's see how the Leafs fare in more of these high intensity games against good quality teams that could be potential playoff opponent. Obviously, not with Calgary, but on the Eastern Conference side of teams similar to Calgary that battle test the Leafs and how the Leafs respond to those tests.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll have a chance on Saturday night. Maybe not that same type of game against the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, let's keep an eye on this narrative as that plays out. I expect the Leafs have a good bounce back game. Sheldon Keefe said he liked a lot of the little things the Leafs did last night. So let's see kind of where they go from here.
It's like that meme where something like this happens and then Leafs fans go back to all the traumatic events of blowing leads and they just get into a dark space. So listen, I don't blame Leafs fans. It has been a very bad decade and beyond for this team. So we'll see how they respond on Saturday. Okay, before we get into our best bets, let's talk about Jozy Altidore, who did say goodbye to TFC this morning. What was your reaction to that news, Mike? And what's next for Jozy Altidore? Is there anything next for him?
Yeah, that's a good question. And first, my reaction to that news is, hey, it's been a long time coming, and I think we were prepared for this as Toronto FC fans as much as you could be. This has been in the rumbling since the start of the offseason. I think the first day of the offseason, Fabrizio Romano, one of the most renowned soccer journalists out there, he tweeted out about Jozy's departure. I learned shortly after that he had, Toronto FC at least, had made the decision where Jozy wouldn't be back as a designated player, and all signs pointed to Jozy Altidore's departure. But as I mentioned, like it's bittersweet because this is a guy who we know he loved being here. And when he was good, when he was on, he was one of the most relatable, best, funnest players to have on your team. This is a guy who embraced the city. He spoke for the fan base. He related to the fan base. He was a legend through and through, and he's really going to go down as one of the most important players in Toronto FC history, seeing as he scored that goal at BMO Field in 2017.
I was there.
Luca, you might have been at that game.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where, that goal was 2 years in the waiting, where, a year before TFC didn't get a goal against Seattle in the final. And I remember that stadium erupting and Jozy running to the corner. And it was good times in Toronto after that, because you think about the parade and, kind of his speech there, saying, he's TFC till he dies. And the six is on a wave, and all of those kind of classic sound bites you have from Josie Altidore. That was because he was so in tune with the culture in the city. He knew who he was in the city. He embraced it, as I mentioned, and TFC fans reciprocated that. So it's a special player departing the club. It's never easy, and especially when you go out on a note that he kind of did, where it's a sour note as Toronto FC are going to be buying out Josie Altidore.
So
That's
what would you
never something in any sport that you
yeah.
want to hear, right?
Yeah.
It's a bitter ending to what was such a special tenure in Toronto. And his next move, Luca, as you asked,
Yeah.
well, reports are he's going to be signing a 3-year TAM contract, total allocation money, or targeted allocation money, with the New England Revolution. And that's an Eastern Conference rival. It's a team that won the Supporters Shield last year, meaning they finished first in the regular season. And he's joining a very talented team over there. So they make the return to BMO Field in Toronto on August 17th. And that'll probably be dubbed the Jozy Altidore return game, as he's expected to make his return home then. So it's interesting that he's moving on to a rival.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I guess overall, we wish Jozy Altidore the best.
Yeah, you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So that perfectly sums up Josie Altidore here. But no, it is bittersweet. I mean, you obviously want the best for the guy. You knew this was coming, but you remember all those great moments. And when I really followed TFC en route to winning that MLS Cup, Josie was probably one of my favorite players to watch. He really summed up everything there is about that team. I actually got to meet him a couple times. I took a picture with him. Just a very great guy, great player on the pitch, and he epitomized for that time frame everything that Toronto FC was all about: the culture, the mentality, the fan base. It was awesome to see. So he's definitely going to be missed. But like anything in sports, you see these legends with the team. Their times eventually come to an end. Kyle Lowry with the Raptors, right? That being another recent example. So yeah, all the best to Josie. It is going to be interesting that he does join a rival, and I can't wait for that battle between those two teams and Josie going up against his old team. That should be fun.
Yeah, it's just kind of like I wish Josie Altidore good luck until he faces Toronto FC, right? And Josie Altidore is going to be getting up for that game. I feel like that motivation is what drives him. A lot of people are writing him off.
Yeah.
Man, in a way that I'm writing him off. I don't believe Josie Altidore will ever go back to the player that he was. And however, if he's used correctly and his minutes are limited, and they can find a way to keep him healthy on the turf, then Jozy Altidore could find a way to create something special there in New England and perhaps sign off his MLS career on a positive note. He's 32 years old. Like we've mentioned, he hasn't been able to stay healthy on the field, but if he can turn that corner, we could be having a very different conversation come the summer, and what I'm sure we'll be talking about Jozy Altidore's return to BMO Field.
Take Josie Altidore anytime goal in that game. He's scoring against TFC. I'm calling it right now. It's happening. Take it.
Can you place that bet now?
No,
Is that
probably
possible
not.
to throw that in there?
That would be some ridiculous odds if you could. All right, let's get into our best bets. It could be either of the night or the weekend. Mike, I'm not sure what your record is right now. What are you at?
14-10.
14-10.
Kind of
Okay.
moving up a little bit.
All right, what do you like?
Do you want
What
to
do you
tell
like
people
tonight,
your
buddy? Or are
record?
you going with the game this weekend?
I'm going to go with the game tonight, but I think you should tell people your record just so they know how much better you are than me.
17-7. Yeah, I'm on a bit of a hot
There you
streak.
go.
What can I say? The NBA has
A
treated me
bit.
well.
A bit. Yeah, I feel like you're on like a 9 or 8 game winning streak, 8-night winning streak. Like you're on fire right now. But I'm 3 games behind you, so it's not the worst.
It's not bad.
I can still make that lead up. We got plenty of time to do this. So I'm going with the game tonight, and I'm going with the NBA. And it's a game that probably no one's going to be watching. It's 2 very bad teams going at it, but I like this spread. I'm going to take the Charlotte Hornets as 7-point favorites tonight in Detroit. Charlotte is a team that they're in shambles right now. However, they're facing the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the lowest spreads we've seen in a Detroit Pistons game, with just 7 points. And the Pistons, I mean, come on, like they're really really bad. Charlotte, meanwhile, I guess they still have hope in potentially securing a play-in position there in the playoffs. So they got something to play for, and there's no better place to sort of bounce back than against the Detroit Pistons. So take Charlotte to cover the 7 point spread.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if Harrell's going to be able to go tonight, but that was a big get for them, I think. I think Charlotte making that move, they clearly want to not only get into the play-in, but beyond that, get into an actual playoff spot. So yeah, I do like that bet. They're due for a big win, and it could come tonight. All right, for mine, I'm actually going to go with the game this weekend. If you haven't already guessed, I'm going with the big game, the Super Bowl on Sunday, Super Bowl 56, going to feature the Rams and the Bengals. I am super excited for this one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Take the over. But that's actually not going to be my pick. I'm going to take the Bengals +4. I think they have a chance to win this game, Mike. I think this is going to be a back and forth, high scoring, close game. And I could see the Bengals in the fourth quarter pull off some magic. Joe Burrow has been unbelievable. This Bengals team has been great, especially as an underdog. And the underdog has usually cashed in at the Super Bowl. This has been a spot where we see the underdog at least keep these games close. So I expect a big day from Burrow, Chase, and I would not be surprised if we're back here on Monday talking about how the Bengals went from having 2 wins 2 years ago to becoming Super Bowl champions. So I'm going to go with the Bengals +4.5.
Yeah, and that's a good bet right there. And maybe Joe Burrow, who, I mean, if you had that before the start of the season, you're sitting really pretty right now. Joe Burrow, what a story that is. And if he can come back, cap this off with a Super Bowl ring, I mean, that'll be one of the most heroic stories you've heard in recent times, considering where he was in college. I've learned a lot about Joe Burrow
Yeah.
leading up to this game, and his story is just straight up incredible. So I'm okay with that bet. I honestly don't know too much about football to make a really honest decision, but it's interesting that you're taking the Bengals despite the Super Bowl being in LA. I wonder, Luca, just let me ask you about that quickly. How much of a factor is the home crowd going to be in the Super Bowl? Because you know that the Super Bowl is kind of filled with a lot of different fan bases. So
Yeah.
how much of a factor is that going to be?
SoFi Field, it's one of the nicer stadiums, but I don't think it's going to be a factor because you look at the Rams' recent games, the opposing team's fan base has usually filled up SoFi Stadium. I don't know what it is, but the Rams fan base hasn't really been on full display. Like when they played the Niners, there were a ton of Niners fans in there. So I expect a lot of Bengals fans to make the trip since they haven't been in this game in so long. So I don't think that's going to be a factor. I think this is just going to be a neutral game. And also, regular fans can go to this game. I mean, have you seen the ticket prices for this game? I mean, there's probably no tickets left, but this is meant for high profile people, guys who own businesses to go to the game. So regular fans, regular people, I hate to say it, like they're not going to be at this game, Mike. So this should be just a neutral game in terms of the fans coming to it.
All right. So let's talk about what everybody wants to know now, Luca. What's your Super Bowl plans? What's your Super Bowl food? What are you going for, man?
You know what? I'm a basic guy. I just go pizza, wings, nothing too crazy. Maybe mixing a couple of drinks, but that's it, man. I'm just a pizza and wings guy. Nothing more than that. I know people go crazy with other things, but I keep it low key. I'm more focused on the game. What I'm always interested about the game is those prop bets. Those prop bets are
Yeah.
amazing. So like what color is Gatorade gonna be? Is the anthem gonna hit over under? What's the coin flip gonna be? Is it gonna be heads or tails? How many dogs are gonna appear in commercials? That's my favorite part of the Super Bowl. Just playing those prop games and just making bets on ridiculous things like that.
I like it. I like it. Let's see who can cash in the most ridiculous bet. Let's see if we can talk about that Monday because I'll be playing along with that. I could at least get along with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty much a toss up there at that point. So let's keep an eye, man.
All
Enjoy the
right,
game this Sunday.
get those prop bets in, get those bets in, and enjoy the big game on Sunday. This is another edition of Toronto Today here on the Parlay. On behalf of myself and Mike, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you all again Monday. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.